Hi, I'm Ellen and I'm the founder of Telexera. We're a messaging and consultancy company based in Switzerland. In an attempt to give some diverse views of the messaging industry, I think that it's really good to remember that there are always two sides to the coin. And nobody knows that better than Ellie David, who's sitting with me here on Zoom. As he has seen both the operator and the aggregator perspective. So Ellie, maybe you want to give an introduction to yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Ellie. I'm 3 months into lockdown with a ridiculous haircut, or lack of haircut to be more precise. So please don't let that, discredit anything that I'm going to tell you over the next few minutes. But so yeah, I was been part of the carrier and mobile operator space for about 15 years. Started off in voice, like many of us, Ellen as well, for our sins. We had to trade these terrible double-digit numbers. And then over the past few years, moved towards the messaging space. Most recently with Telia, where I launched their A2P SMS hub. And worked very closely with the Telia group to set that up. 3 months ago, at the start of March, I joined Twilio as head of the emerging markets. And not only did I leave the carrier space to go to the aggregator world, but I also left the carrier element of my job, and I'm now on the go-to-market enterprise space. So I kind of come from seeing the nuts and bolts towards selling the APIs and software into everything from startups to large banks and enterprises.
So maybe you could start with giving us an impression of what the difference is between the carrier view and the aggregator view. How did you see the world of SMS when you were at Telia versus the way that you now see it at Twilio?
Yeah, so I think when you're in the mobile operator world or the carrier world, like you see SMS as a revenue stream. It's a product, it's something that gets used, but fundamentally it's something that you have. It's benchmarked every year on the growth of A2P and growth messaging, in contrast to, let's say, voice and what was happening. And you see it as something that you own because it's terminating on your network. And your job is to think about how can I maximize, the revenue that come from that, or how can we really, work in that way. And then on the flip side of that, now when you come into the aggregator world, you see it as part of a customer journey, one piece of a puzzle that a customer might use in communicating with their end users, if you like, or one channel in that way. So that's probably the biggest difference.
Okay. And do you think, you obviously think that there's space for both sides of the coin in the market. It's a very big market. I think you both have very different angles on it. But do you not see a possibility that the operators will want to take back this margin and start servicing the operators in a much cleverer way themselves?
Yes, and definitely. As you know, Ellen, when I was at Telia, we were already embarking on that journey, working with our opcos. What I would say in hindsight is, I think I personally grossly underestimated the complexity when it comes to selling software and software-based, like APIs and software. Like, I think there was this kind of view of, if we had certain APIs, we could then go and talk to enterprises or banks and kind of, let's say, take back that. And now when I'm at Twilio 3 months in, I'm still not sure how to sell it. I'm supposed to be managing a team. They've been there for about a year. I hope none of them are watching this, but I don't know how many of them can sell it. And then of course, and then the reality is, like, every deal we do is really different, and we have to bring in a solutions engineer into the equation to help understand how it all works, how it all works together. And then if it's like Authy, and so it's security based, we bring in the security expert who comes in. So I think the layers of complexity is probably the one thing that mobile operators underestimate. I think mobile operator sales teams are really good at selling a lot of their core products, and this is just so widely different. From my experience now being on the other side of it. I think mobile operators are really good at many things, and protecting their network in particular is something they should be focusing on for sure, and getting the revenues from that. But yeah, it's I don't know. I'm obviously going to be biased now, but I
couldn't imagine otherwise.
No, but yeah, that's what struck me is you think it's a lot simpler than it really is in some ways.
So maybe you can give us some more impression of the types of products that you're now looking at from the Twilio side, because I think, like you've already said, a lot of people from the carrier and operator world think it's all about just selling an API connection or just selling an SMPP connection, and they're not looking at the services that need to go behind it. So maybe you can expand a bit more on what those services are that you're looking at now that you're in the aggregator space.
Yes, so I think, as I said, I think it's about finding the right service for the right use case, and what does that customer want to achieve. In many occasions it is SMS, so notifications, security, still very much always going to be SMS is going to be the core functionality. But as we look at now, what I see, of course, a lot of in my region, which is Middle East Africa, is a ton of WhatsApp now requests, and I think a lot of it's driven by operators in those regions not enabling two-way SMS quick enough. So what's happened is now, if you want some level of two-way communications, if you're a delivery company or whatever it might be, even the irony is we even have mobile operators coming to us to use our WhatsApp APIs, right, for their customer service.
Of course, it's a big market, certainly.
Right, so like their end users want, they as mobile operators want two-way communications on a customer services level, and it's like, well, if surely you own that, you should be,
you have the numbers.
You have the numbers, right? It's not always that simple. So of course you've got SMS, WhatsApp, but then in-app chat, video, any form of communication. I will say the one thing that surprised me is, and this is the biggest difference, I've not heard RCS mentioned once.
Really? Okay, yeah. That's very fascinating.
So I have, of course, like maybe more on the US side of the equation, and they're talking about it, and Twilio will be involved. But when I talk about EMEA, or I talk about particularly emerging markets within EMEA, I've not had the RCS conversation with anyone ever, apart from explaining to my team what RCS was.
Very good. I hope you gave them a good education.
Yeah, I was like, how long have you got? It's very philosophical. And that's massive, because I know, sitting on the other side, there's so much about RCS workshops. The GSMA has such a big push towards it. And I think that the long-term view is, for me personally, I can't speak for all of Twilio, but within my region, is if it works and it comes up, great. It will just be another channel. The way that WhatsApp is a channel, the way that it's SMS, it's just not going to be this all-encompassing thing unless it's done perfectly, and Apple are on board. And as time goes on, that just looks increasingly less likely. So that's probably the biggest shock.
But you said that you're getting a great deal of requests from your region about WhatsApp. How many of those are closing as WhatsApp deals, and how many are closing as SMS deals? I mean, we get asked here at Telexir all the time for WhatsApp solutions, but as soon as we dig deeper into what their actual requirements are, we end up back at SMS. And I wondered whether you had the same experience where you are.
No, it's a very good point, and you're right, it's probably 50-50, because a lot of the time people come to you and asking about WhatsApp, thinking it's probably going to be cheaper than SMS, or they have an SMS use case, and those are the ones that, you're right, you turn away, because what they actually want is cheaper SMS or SMS in the end, and then the remaining 50%, and then the remaining 50% I find are genuine, and they are just, like I say, two-way communications, or particularly in the Middle East, or now adding things like geolocation into WhatsApp for deliveries is something that, again, SMS can't do. So let's see, but it is still more expensive. It is for specific use cases. So it's not, again, it's not going to replace SMS. And the bigger question is, if the operators had enabled to SMS already, like probably instead of me saying 50% of those use cases will be converted to WhatsApp, I'd be saying a lot less, because again, we could have done that through a long number or two-way short code. So
and do you see more operators getting on board now in your region with virtual numbers, or are they still extremely hesitant?
Extremely hesitant. I think maybe it's sometimes the regulator holding them back, because a lot of the time we've been speaking to a lot of them who really want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And onto the regulator, again, my personal view is that if it does happen, like the KYC process would have to be very similar to what WhatsApp is today. You know, onboarding customers to use it, and actually, I think a lot of the industry, you know, that will become more common anyway. You know, but
yes, I mean, it varies massively already, even in Western Europe. From one country to another, one country is asking you for details of end users and what their use case is, and the next country is handing them out by the thousand to whoever wants them.
Yeah, exactly.
And with data security going up and up, I can only imagine that that the requirements on virtual numbers are going to go through the roof over the next years.
Yeah, look, and maybe just to take it off tangent slightly, but to talk about WhatsApp, you know, for you and I coming from the voice industry, we saw the voice industry was really like you know, WhatsApp took it over. All of a sudden you blinked and that was it.
It was gone.
And it was gone. And the big mistake that operators made there was more on the pricing element of just increasing their pricing, looking at the short-term gains that year. And as revenue, as minutes dropped, they just went to increase the revenue more and more till they got to the point where you just hit this inelastic point of voice traffic, right? Which was, okay, well, this is always going to be on voice. And I think my worry coming from the mobile operator world would be, is that the same risk now that operators run, like by not enabling additional functionality and thinking, oh, well, we should be charging 6-7 cents per message because the market can sustain it. Is it a short-term view? And is that going to eventually erode the value that they could have, the way that basically it happened in voice, because you take this 1 year view of, that was my revenue last year, I need to increase it this year because my targets have gone up by X%, and you get into this negative spiral.
Certainly. I mean, I think there's plenty of countries in the market at the moment that are obviously splitting out the national traffic from the international traffic to ensure that they allow all use cases in country to really manage and to be able to afford to use the solution. But obviously it penalizes quite heavily the international aggregators. And I wonder what your thoughts are there. Is the international traffic just going to drop off? Are they going to find other routes of getting their messages across to customers? Or do you think they're willing and able to pay those much higher prices?
I think what an operator will never see is like you say, is all the use cases that fall by the wayside. You know, all the developers, clever ideas, particularly like when you think about markets like Pakistan, Bangladesh, where this has just happened now. You know, really rates have really shot up in the last few kind of months, and it's like, that's fine. You know, you could argue that's okay for WhatsApp, Facebook. They have their own metrics of how much each user is worth to them every month. Yeah. But there's going to be a lot of other use cases that they'll never exist, because the person who had thought about this, now suddenly it's not worth them using messaging anymore. You know, they might just go back to email as verification, or they might, who knows, you know, whatever it might be.
There are alternatives out there. Exactly.
There are alternatives out there, and I think a lot of the time when aggregators go to operators for monetization, you know, to win those, you just, you know, you're selling, this is the additional revenue you can get, and this is it. What they could probably do better at is identifying the lower priced potential use cases and enabling them, managing, you know, stopping fraud happening, but think about what else could be done if the price was a bit cheaper, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, fraud and security are obviously the two number one talked about subjects in SMS.
Yeah.
and messaging in all areas of messaging. Do you think that other mediums other than SMS could be more secure? Or do you think that people will manage the security on SMS to ensure that it stays on a key where it is now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess it is still fundamentally, very, very secure. One-time passwords, I don't really see them going away. We have Authy, which is an app which has push notifications, has SMS as all part of it. But I don't think it'll change, and I also think that fundamentally, even like WhatsApp on a device isn't as secure as the SMS that's embedded in that device anyway for verification. So yeah, it's a good question. The firewalls are getting better. The technology out there that manages keywords are getting better. People speak about AI being used. I don't really know what that means, but it sounds amazing. So I'm sure it's doing a good job.
Okay. What is your future vision of what's going to happen in the messaging world? Where are we going to be in 5 years? What are we going to be talking about then? Are we still going to be talking about security, phishing, security? Do you see that more settling down and people really getting back to focusing on the products?
Yes, look, in 5 years, I probably think that the lasting use case will still be one-time passwords, just because it's still your device, it's still your mobile ID, it's still with you at all times, and I can't think of a more secure way as part of a verification process than that. I can't really. I'd be surprised if marketing was still pushed via SMS. But then, you never know. And there'll definitely be other channels that we haven't even come across yet. Brands will find a way to provide a better brand experience on your handset for sure, and have more of a direct to consumer communication, be that through RCS or something else. That will find a way to do that. I'd almost guess, if I had to guess, I would say that while Apple and Google are having this RCS fight and trying to get this thing, like there will be some OTT platform we've not thought about yet or come across that suddenly is on your handset as an application which has this
amazing, there for everybody.
That is there for everyone and has this amazing marketing rich experience, which is what brands want to put onto your mobile. That would be my thing. I always say, I don't always say, but I always think back to like BlackBerry. There was that moment in time where everyone had a BlackBerry. It was all about BBM, and it was just this most incredible thing. It was, and if BlackBerry had open sourced their chat and just put it as an app like BlackBerry Messenger, WhatsApp would never have existed, because they would have had 300 million high-end users of their service as a base, and that there would have never have been a WhatsApp. And BlackBerry would have evolved, and to bring the point back, like I kind of think that's what's happening with RCS. While you have this whole Google keeping it, and Apple not wanting to really enable it, and it's not being open sourced for that reason, like something that can be on any single device will take it over. And there'll be that inflection moment for the mobile operators where they say, if only we could have got that right, if only Apple maybe could have enabled it, we could have had that revenue stream. But invariably, the problem with mobile operators is you exist in this ecosystem, cooperation and competition, and you need something that sits on top of it and can pull it all together. And that probably goes back to your initial point about the role of aggregators. There's still so many countries where mobile operators can only terminate their own network, don't look internationally. And again, you've got this single aggregator API that sits on top of it who can seamlessly distribute it, messaging across all the different channels and across all the different networks. So that's kind of, I think, how it works.
Yeah, it's a very good analogy with the BlackBerry Messenger. It's a long time since we've thought of that product, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
If only, if only, if only.
Only, yeah, someone at BlackBerry who definitely said, look, we need to put this on the App Store and open source it. And the rest of the company was like, you're crazy, you're fired. And I was like, I told you. If only they listened to me.
Very good. So to tie it up, I wanted to obviously mention the messaging school that we're hosting these interviews through. It's obviously a new venture from Telexera to bring more knowledge, broader knowledge for all the new entrants that are coming into the market at the moment. There's obviously a lot of movement of voice people to messaging, as you and I have both made the transition.
That voice is the best school for messaging. That if you come from this voice background, if you're going into messaging, you're going to be fine. There's nothing that messaging is where voice was like 15 years ago, basically, on the way that the carrier teams are buying and selling. You know, the more you see it, it's quite, yeah. So if you're coming from voice, you're one step ahead. Yeah.
Perfect.
That's what I was saying.
Okay. Well, let's leave it there. Thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you.